What happens when an African leader plans to end the neocolonial rule and foreign companies extracting resources in Africa? How is he made a harsh example by the West that anybody who thinks about doing good for Africa and challenging the status quo will be assassinated? Leaders like Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, and various others were brutally assassinated. Their only crime was thinking about making Africa strong and challenging the West and its power. They had grand plans that could end Western hegemony forever. But before they could do anything, the West carried out covert missions and assassinated those leaders. In some cases, sadly, the West used the actors within those African countries to kill beloved leaders like Patrice Lumumba. They were tortured and killed in cold blood. But why were they exactly killed, and how those covert missions were carried out?
The former Congo premier who was captured when he fled inland. The former...
Welcome to a new episode of Black Afric Diary, a channel where we talk about Black African history, culture, arts, and civilization. It's a place where you will see the real picture of Black Africa, its stories, and the events defining it. In this episode, we will tell you about the assassinations of African leaders by the West and the reason behind them. Let's get started. Number 10. Chris Hani. Chris Hani emerged as a prominent figure in the anti-apartheid movement, celebrated for his commitment to justice, equality, and socialism. His rise to prominence coincided with a tumultuous period in South Africa, marked by escalating pressure both at home and abroad against the apartheid regime. Born in 1942, Hani spent his formative years in Sabalele Township in South Africa's Eastern Cape Province. Growing up, he witnessed the harsh realities of apartheid, which fueled his passionate involvement in the fight against racial discrimination and oppression. Hani's political awakening led him to join the African National Congress, ANC, the foremost anti-apartheid organization in South Africa. Hani's dedication and leadership swiftly propelled him to prominence within the ANC, establishing him as one of its most influential figures. He played a crucial role in organizing resistance against apartheid policies, actively participating in protests, boycotts, and acts of civil disobedience aimed at challenging the racist practices of the apartheid regime. As the anti-apartheid movement gained momentum domestically and globally, Hani emerged as a leading advocate for radical change. He became renowned for his impassioned speeches advocating armed struggle against the apartheid government and championing the establishment of a socialist society based on principles of equality and justice. This somehow threatened West, who was a supporter of the apartheid government. Hani's steadfast opposition to apartheid and his calls for comprehensive social and economic reform directly challenged Western interests, particularly those of the United States and its allies. The apartheid regime, backed by support from Western governments, sought to maintain its grip on power and protect the economic interests of multinational corporations operating in South Africa. In April 1993, just a year before South Africa's inaugural democratic elections, Chris Hani met a tragic end outside his home in Dawn Park, a suburb near Johannesburg. He was assassinated by Janus Wallus, a right-wing extremist affiliated with white supremacist groups vehemently opposed to the ANC and its vision for a free and democratic South Africa. The assassination sent shockwaves throughout South Africa and the world, raising concerns of renewed violence and instability leading up to the historic elections. Mass protests erupted as thousands took to the streets to mourn Hani's untimely death and denounce the senseless act of violence. The circumstances surrounding Hani's assassination sparked suspicions of broader complicity and external involvement, particularly among entities vested in maintaining the status quo in South Africa. Many speculated that the apartheid regime, in collaboration with Western allies, may have orchestrated Hani's murder to sabotage the country's transition to democracy. Despite official investigations into Hani's assassination, lingering questions persist regarding the extent of the conspiracy and the identities of those responsible for planning and executing the killing. There are speculations that influential figures within South Africa's security apparatus may have colluded with right-wing extremists to eliminate Hani and thwart his potential leadership role in the emerging democratic government. In the aftermath of Hani's tragic death, South Africa grappled with a period of uncertainty and turmoil. The ANC and its allies mobilized support for the impending elections, vowing to honor Hani's legacy by continuing the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. On April 27, 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, marking the end of apartheid and the dawn of a new era characterized by democracy and reconciliation. Although Chris Hani was absent, his spirit and visionary leadership endured, inspiring millions of South Africans to uphold his legacy and strive for a more equitable and democratic society. Number 9. Samora Machel. Machel's political journey began in the 1960s when Mozambique was still under Portuguese colonial rule. As a founding member of the Mozambique Liberation Front, Frelimo, he played a key role in the fight against Portuguese colonialism, quickly ascending within Frelimo's ranks due to his exceptional leadership skills and unwavering dedication to his people's liberation. Upon Mozambique's independence in 1975, Machel assumed the presidency and embarked on an ambitious mission to rebuild the nation ravaged by years of war. He aimed to establish a socialist society based on principles of equality and justice, with initiatives focused on empowering marginalized communities and steering Mozambique towards self-sufficiency and prosperity. However, Machel's vision for Mozambique directly challenged the interests of the West, particularly South Africa and its apartheid regime. Mozambique's support for liberation movements in neighboring countries, such as the African National Congress, ANC, in South Africa, drew the ire of the apartheid government and its Western allies. In addition to backing regional liberation movements, Machel's administration pursued policies aimed at nationalizing key industries, redistributing land to rural communities, and improving education and healthcare for all Mozambicans. These measures threatened the economic interests of Western corporations and unsettled the dominance of Western powers in the region. As tensions with the West escalated, Mozambique became a target of destabilization efforts orchestrated by the apartheid regime and its collaborators. South Africa's security forces, along with groups like the Mozambican National Resistance, RENAMO, launched a brutal campaign aimed at undermining Machel's government and destabilizing the country. Despite facing relentless attacks from external forces, Machel remained steadfast in his commitment to Mozambique's independence and sovereignty. He tirelessly advocated for regional solidarity and international support for the struggle against apartheid, earning admiration among liberation movements and progressive factions worldwide. However, tragically, on October 19, 1986, Machel's life was tragically cut short in a plane crash near the border between Mozambique and South Africa. The circumstances surrounding the crash remain clouded in controversy and speculation, with many suspecting it was orchestrated by the apartheid regime to eliminate Machel and destabilize Mozambique. While investigations cited pilot error as the cause of the crash, suspicions of foul play persisted. Evidence suggesting the plane may have been led off course by false navigational beacons arranged by South African intelligence fueled doubts about the crash's true cause. In the aftermath of Machel's untimely death, Mozambique was plunged into a period of turmoil and uncertainty. His loss was deeply felt within Mozambique, across the African continent, and beyond. Machel was mourned as a hero of the liberation struggle and a steadfast advocate for social justice and human rights. Number 8. Mohamed Boudiaf. In an era marked by struggles for independence, the complexities of post-colonial nation-building, and the shadow of Cold War rivalries, Boudiaf emerged as a pivotal figure in Algerian politics. His political journey began in the 1950s when he played a significant role as a key member of the National Liberation Front, FLN, during Algeria's fierce fight for freedom from French colonial rule. Boudiaf fervently advocated for his nation's liberation from foreign oppression and the establishment of an independent Algerian state. Following Algeria's independence in 1962, Boudiaf continued to be active in politics, holding various governmental positions while championing causes of social justice and economic advancement. However, his stance against corruption and his dedication to democratic principles often led to clashes with the ruling elite, resulting in periods of exile and imprisonment. Boudiaf's return to Algeria in the early 1990s coincided with a period of significant political turmoil and violence. The nation grappled with economic challenges, social unrest, and the emergence of Islamist movements challenging the government's authority. In the midst of this turbulence, Boudiaf emerged as a voice advocating for national reconciliation and political reform. Yet, Boudiaf's calls for dialogue and unity threatened entrenched interests within the ruling circles and extremist factions. While his efforts to bridge societal divides and guide Algeria toward stability and democratic governance won him admiration among ordinary Algerians, they also drew the ire of powerful vested interests. Tragically, on June 29, 1992, during a public event in Annaba, Boudiaf fell victim to an assassination. Although it's said that the perpetrator acted independently, suspicions arose regarding external influences aiming to destabilize Algeria and impede Boudiaf's reform efforts. The circumstances surrounding Boudiaf's assassination fueled speculation of Western involvement, particularly among those who saw his policies as a challenge to Western interests in Algeria and the wider region. His advocacy for political reform and anti-corruption measures directly challenged the status quo, seen as advantageous to Western powers seeking stability and access to Algeria's abundant energy resources. Furthermore, Boudiaf's assassination coincided with mounting Western pressure on Algeria to adopt neoliberal economic policies and strengthen ties with Western institutions. His vision of an autonomous and self-sufficient Algeria contrasted with the neoliberal agenda favored by Western governments and multinational corporations. Although concrete evidence of Western involvement in Boudiaf's assassination remains elusive, the timing and context of his death raised suspicions of potential complicity or tacit support from external actors. Analysts speculate that Western intelligence agencies might have disregarded threats against Boudiaf or covertly aided elements within Algeria's security apparatus to eliminate him. Boudiaf's assassination dealt a severe blow to Algeria's fragile democratic transition, plunging the nation into further turmoil. His loss deprived Algeria of a visionary leader capable of steering the country towards reconciliation, stability, and democratic governance. Number 7, Pierre Mulele. In a period characterized by decolonization, Cold War tensions, and the pursuit of national sovereignty, Mulele emerged as a prominent figure in Congolese politics. His political journey began in the late 1950s amid the Belgian Congo's transition to independence. As a young Marxist intellectual, Mulele swiftly rose within the nationalist movement, advocating for radical social and economic reforms to tackle the inequalities inherited from colonial rule. His passionate advocacy for socialist principles resonated with many Congolese seeking a more just and equitable society. Upon the DRC's independence in 1960, Mulele played a crucial role in the government of Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, the nation's first democratically elected leader. However, Lumumba's leadership was cut short by a CIA-backed coup in September 1960. In the midst of the ensuing chaos and power struggles, Mulele emerged as a prominent figure in the Simba Rebellion, a grassroots movement aimed at challenging the neo-colonial order imposed on the DRC by Western powers. Inspired by Marxist ideology and fueled by grievances against the corrupt post-Lumumba regimes, the Simba Rebellion gained momentum, particularly in the country's eastern regions. Mulele's leadership of the Simba Rebellion posed a direct threat to Western interests in the DRC and beyond. The rebellion's fervent calls for radical social and economic transformation, including land redistribution and the expulsion of foreign corporations, raised concerns among Western policymakers who viewed such policies as contrary to their economic and geopolitical objectives. As the Simba Rebellion gained ground, Western powers, led by the United States and Belgium, intervened militarily to support the Congolese government's efforts to suppress the uprising. Under the pretext of restoring order and stability, the intervention involved airstrikes, arms supplies, and the deployment of military advisors to bolster government forces against the rebels. In 1968, amidst the brutal conflict, Pierre Mulele was captured by government forces, marking a significant turning point in the Simba Rebellion and the broader struggle for social justice in the DRC. However, Mulele's fate was not determined solely by Congolese authorities, but also by their Western backers, who saw him as a symbol of resistance to their hegemonic ambitions in Africa. Following his capture, Mulele endured weeks of torture and interrogation at the hands of Congolese authorities with the implicit support of Western intelligence agencies. CIA operatives and Belgian advisors reportedly participated in his interrogation, seeking to extract information about the rebellion's leadership and strategy. Despite enduring relentless torture, Mulele remained strong, refusing to betray his comrades or abandon his revolutionary ideals. His commitment to social justice and national liberation earned him the admiration of many Congolese and Africans who regarded him as a symbol of resistance against Western imperialism and neo-colonialism. Tragically, on October 3, 1968, Pierre Mulele was executed by Congolese government forces, his body mutilated and displayed as a warning to dissenters. His death marked the end of the Simba Rebellion and dealt a severe blow to the aspirations of countless Congolese for a fairer society. The assassination of Pierre Mulele was not merely a result of internal power struggles or the actions of a repressive regime. It was a deliberate act of violence perpetrated by Western powers and their local collaborators to suppress dissent and maintain control over the DRC's resources and population. Mulele's assassination serves as a stark reminder of the lengths to which the West would go to protect its interests in Africa, regardless of the human cost or perpetuation of suffering and injustice. Number 6. Sylvanus Olympio. Olympio's leadership was marked by his commitment to Togo's sovereignty and his pursuit of policies prioritizing its citizens' welfare over external influences. His initiatives included economic nationalism, advocating for self-sufficiency and the nationalization of key industries, and promoting Pan-Africanism to foster unity among African nations. Additionally, he vehemently opposed neo-colonialism, aiming to liberate Togo from former colonial powers' economic and political dominance. His policies directly challenged Western interests, notably those of France and other colonial powers, threatening their economic and political influence in the region. This opposition culminated in an orchestrated coup d'état on January 13, 1963, led by elements within the Togolese military, allegedly supported by external entities. Olympio was captured and executed shortly after the coup. His body was found outside the U.S. Embassy in Lome, Togo's capital. This event plunged Togo into a period of political instability and authoritarian rule, setting a precedent for military interventions in African politics and undermining democratic governance in the region. However, despite his untimely demise, Olympio's legacy as a proponent of African independence endured, inspiring future generations of African leaders in their struggle for liberation and self-determination. Calls for justice and accountability for Olympio's assassination persist, highlighting the need to confront the legacy of political violence and foreign interference in Africa's history. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Number 5. Eduardo Mondlane. Eduardo Mondlane, a key figure in Mozambique's quest for independence, tragically met his demise in 1969 under circumstances suggesting the involvement of external forces, particularly Western interests threatened by his anti-colonial stance and revolutionary policies. Mondlane's leadership was defined by a commitment to freeing Mozambique from Portuguese colonial rule and establishing a democratic socialist society. His policies aimed to uplift the oppressed masses and create a nation liberated from foreign exploitation. Advocating armed resistance as the primary means to overthrow Portuguese colonialism, he emphasized the importance of asserting Mozambique's right to self-determination. As a key figure in founding the Mozambique Liberation Front, Frelimo, Mondlane led the guerrilla movement in a prolonged struggle against Portuguese forces, earning widespread support among Mozambicans. His vision prioritized social justice, economic equality, and the redistribution of resources to benefit the marginalized majority, aiming to dismantle the entrenched systems of colonial exploitation in Mozambique. Yet Mondlane's revolutionary agenda posed a direct threat to Western interests, particularly those of Portugal and its allies. His leadership of Frelimo challenged the legitimacy of Portuguese colonial rule, inspiring similar liberation movements across Africa. Western powers, notably the United States, viewed his socialist ideologies and connections to countries like the Soviet Union and China with apprehension, fearing regional destabilization and the erosion of Western influence. Additionally, Mozambique's abundant natural resources, coveted by Western corporations, posed a threat to their economic interests. Mondlane's policies aimed at nationalizing industries and redistributing land directly challenged Western economic exploitation in Mozambique. The tragic event of Mondlane's assassination unfolded on February 3, 1969, in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, where a parcel bomb delivered to his office claimed his life. The circumstances surrounding his death strongly suggest the involvement of external actors seeking to silence a prominent anti-colonial leader. Mondlane fell victim to a bomb disguised as a book, which exploded upon opening, instantly killing him and injuring several others nearby. Suspicions of Portuguese involvement in Mondlane's assassination arose due to the timing and method of the attack. The Portuguese colonial regime was vested in eliminating Mondlane, who posed a significant threat to their rule in Mozambique. While direct evidence linking Western powers to Mondlane's assassination remains hidden, allegations of Western complicity persist. Some speculate that Western intelligence agencies may have supported groups seeking to eliminate Mondlane and undermine the independence movement in Mozambique. Eduardo Mondlane's assassination was a profound loss for Mozambique and the broader African liberation movement. Despite his untimely demise, his legacy as a pioneering anti-colonial leader and advocate for social justice endures. His efforts laid the foundation for Mozambique's eventual independence in 1975, inspiring future generations in their ongoing struggle for justice, equality, and self-determination. Number 4. Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi's leadership was defined by a steadfast rejection of Western influence in the Middle East and Africa. He advocated for Pan-Africanism and Arab nationalism, urging unity among African and Arab nations to resist Western interference and combat neocolonialism. He also pursued resource nationalism, aiming to tighten Libya's grip on its abundant oil reserves and reduce Western dominance in the nation's oil industry. What's more, Gaddafi vehemently opposed Western military involvement in the region, particularly in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. He condemned what he saw as Western imperialism and meddling in the affairs of sovereign nations. Additionally, he offered support to various anti-Western movements and organizations, including militant groups opposing Western interests in the Middle East and Africa. The Arab Spring of 2011 spread across the Middle East and North Africa, sparking widespread protests and uprisings against authoritarian regimes, including Gaddafi's rule in Libya. However, experts believe that sentiments against him were spread in Libya by external forces that wanted the locals to overthrow and kill Gaddafi. And the same happened. As the conflict in Libya intensified, NATO intervened to support rebel forces seeking to overthrow Gaddafi's regime. Initially aimed at protecting civilians from Gaddafi's forces, the intervention gradually transitioned into a concerted effort to aid the rebels in toppling the Libyan government. Gaddafi's demise occurred on October 20th, 2011, following the fall of his hometown of Sirte to rebel forces. The circumstances surrounding his death remain murky, with conflicting reports of his capture and demise. Accounts suggest that Gaddafi, along with a small group of loyalists, tried to escape Sirte as rebel forces closed in. Their convoy reportedly faced NATO airstrikes, forcing them to abandon their vehicles and seek refuge in nearby drainage pipes. Later, rebel fighters captured Gaddafi and his entourage. Graphic footage emerged, showing Gaddafi being violently beaten and dragged through Sirte's streets by triumphant rebels. However, these rebels did not realize at that time that they were cleverly being used as a tool by the West. Gaddafi purportedly suffered multiple gunshot wounds, leading to his death. The circumstances of Gaddafi's demise raised widespread scrutiny and questions about potential violations of international law, particularly regarding the treatment of prisoners of war. Human rights organizations called for thorough investigations into allegations of summary executions and extrajudicial killings. Although Gaddafi's death was primarily at the hands of Libyan rebel forces, suspicions persist regarding Western involvement and support for the rebels. NATO's intervention significantly weakened Gaddafi's regime, facilitating the rebels' progress. Furthermore, there are allegations that Western intelligence agencies, notably those of the United States and its allies, covertly aided the rebel forces with weapons, training, and intelligence. This clandestine assistance bolstered the rebels' capabilities and contributed to their eventual triumph. Gaddafi's ouster and subsequent demise were viewed as a strategic victory for Western powers, particularly those aiming to secure control over Libya's oil wealth and influence the trajectory of the Arab Spring uprisings in the region. Muammar Gaddafi's death marked the end of an era in Libyan history, symbolizing the end of a prosperous period in the nation's modern story. Number 3. Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral was a towering figure in Africa's quest for independence and emerged as a visionary leader and intellectual, crucial in the liberation movements of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. Cabral's leadership embodied a profound commitment to social justice and the liberation of African nations from the grip of colonialism and imperialism. He envisioned a future where African countries could carve their own paths independently. Put simply, all his policies were aimed at weakening the West in Africa, and the West could not tolerate that. Cabral passionately advocated for armed resistance as a crucial means of breaking free from colonial oppression and asserting African sovereignty. He firmly believed armed struggle was indispensable in breaking the chains of subjugation. Furthermore, he was crucial in establishing the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, PAIGC, a political movement dedicated to freeing both nations from Portuguese colonial rule. Under his adept guidance, the PAIGC launched a formidable guerrilla warfare campaign against Portuguese forces, culminating in Guinea-Bissau's independence in 1973. Recognizing the transformative potential of education and mobilization, Cabral spearheaded literacy campaigns and grassroots educational initiatives to empower the masses and garner support for the independence movement. However, Cabral's bold pursuit of liberation and his ability to rally widespread support directly threatened Western colonial interests, notably those of Portugal. His leadership of the PAIGC directly challenged Portuguese colonial rule, eroding their authority in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, and inspiring similar liberation movements across the continent. Moreover, Cabral's embrace of socialist ideologies and his close ties to socialist nations like the Soviet Union and Cuba unsettled Western powers, particularly the United States, who feared the spread of socialist governments in Africa, jeopardizing Western dominance. Additionally, the abundant natural resources of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, including agricultural land and mineral deposits, heightened Western concerns about relinquishing control of these valuable assets to independent African governments. Tragically, on January 20th, 1973, just months before Guinea-Bissau's independence, Amilcar Cabral became a victim of a treacherous plot orchestrated by factions within the PAIGC with implicit backing from Western powers. Internal divisions within the PAIGC, spearheaded by figures like Inocencio Hani, fueled accusations against Cabral of straying from the core principles of the liberation struggle and yielding to Western interests, ultimately paving the way for his assassination. Members of Cabral's inner circle, including his half-brother Luis Cabral and high-ranking PAIGC officials, colluded with Portuguese intelligence operatives and elements within the Western intelligence network to eliminate Cabral and quash the independence movement. Tragically, Cabral was ambushed and fatally shot outside his residence in Conakry, Guinea. Despite efforts to save him, Cabral succumbed to his injuries, leaving behind a legacy that transcended his early death. Number 2. Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara, often celebrated as the African Che Guevara, served as Burkina Faso's president from 1983 until his assassination in 1987. His presidency was defined by bold policies that reshaped Burkina Faso, previously known as Upper Volta, into an independent and just society. However, his commitment to revolutionary ideals and opposition to Western influence ultimately led to his downfall. During Sankara's tenure, Burkina Faso witnessed a surge of progressive reforms to uplift its marginalized communities. These initiatives included sweeping land reforms that redistributed land from feudal landlords to peasants, empowering rural areas and enhancing agricultural output. Additionally, he prioritized public health and education, initiating nationwide vaccination campaigns, building schools and healthcare facilities, and promoting literacy across the nation. Sankara's vocal opposition to Western imperialism and his call for African self-sufficiency resonated with many. He denounced foreign aid and debt reliance, urging African nations to break free from neo-colonial constraints. Therefore, Sankara's radical reforms and anti-imperialist stance provoked the displeasure of Western powers, particularly France and the United States. They perceived his government as a threat to their interests in Africa. His land reforms and economic policies emphasizing self-sufficiency directly challenged Western corporations and multinational companies operating in Burkina Faso. His support for liberation movements and revolutionary governments in neighboring nations further isolated Burkina Faso diplomatically, leaving it vulnerable to external interference. Evidence suggests that the CIA and French intelligence agencies played a role in plotting against Sankara's government, offering support to his opponents and facilitating his overthrow. On October 15, 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup orchestrated by his close confidant, Blaise Compaoré, who subsequently seized power and assumed the presidency. Number 1. Patrice Lumumba. Patrice Lumumba, the inaugural Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, was a dynamic leader with a vision to unite the newly liberated nation and enact policies fostering genuine sovereignty and economic autonomy from colonial forces. However, his initiatives and rhetoric swiftly clashed with Western interests. Lumumba vehemently opposed Belgian colonial rule, striving to eradicate all traces of Belgian influence within Congo. This included the nationalization of crucial industries and the expulsion of Belgian officials, which directly threatened Belgium's economic stakes. And during the Cold War, Lumumba's outreach to the Soviet Union for assistance in quelling internal unrest raised alarm bells for the United States and its allies. Their concern centered on the potential Soviet sway over Congo, a nation abundant in resources like uranium, which is crucial for nuclear capabilities. Additionally, Lumumba championed African unity and cooperation, a stance viewed as challenging Western dominance in the region. This posture not only unsettled colonial powers but also annoyed African leaders aligned with the West, favoring gradual reforms and retaining ties with former colonial masters. Following Congo's independence in June 1960, the nation plunged into chaos, marked by secessionist movements in mineral-rich regions like Katanga and South Kasai, backed by Belgian mining interests. Lumumba's perceived threat to Western interests prompted the United States, particularly the CIA and Belgium, to contemplate drastic measures, including his assassination. In September 1960, Colonel Joseph Mobutu, bolstered by CIA and Belgian support, staged a coup, resulting in Lumumba's house arrest. However, Lumumba's tenacity led to a daring escape attempt, aiming to rally his supporters in Stanleyville. Subsequently recaptured in December 1960 by Mobutu's forces, Lumumba was transported to Katanga, a province under the control of Moise Tshombe, one of his political adversaries. There, Lumumba and his comrades Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito faced brutal treatment at the hands of Belgian officers and Katangese soldiers. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba and his associates were subjected to a mock trial before being executed by a firing squad in a remote area near Elizabethville. The involvement of Belgian officers and Katangese officials in Lumumba's execution was evident, portraying a gruesome end marked by multiple gunshot wounds. To obliterate any trace of Lumumba's existence, Belgian officers orchestrated the dismemberment and dissolution of the bodies in sulfuric acid. The remains were meticulously scattered to ensure total eradication. The complicity of Western powers in Lumumba's downfall cannot be understated. The CIA's documented efforts to thwart Lumumba's leadership underscored fears of Congo aligning with the Soviet bloc, jeopardizing Western access to strategic resources. Moreover, Belgian authorities, acknowledging their moral responsibility, admitted to the active participation of Belgian officers in Lumumba's execution and the subsequent disposal of his remains. What do you think? Can the West today kill powerful African leaders who are directly challenging the West? Or do you believe that now African leaders have grown stronger and they cannot be easily killed at the West's will? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on the killings of African leaders when they wanted to change Africa's fate and were punished. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.